back. You're watching The Money Show. You know, there are some Indians who choose to leave India's shores in search of opportunities abroad, but there's always something that ties them back here to India. It could be friends and family, it could be the food and culture, or in fact, it could be investment opportunities, or it could be a combination of all of those factors. It's not just me saying that. It is in fact a report that HSBC has come out with based on a study that they did, based on a survey that they conducted, and they spoke to thousands of global Indians. We'll talk a little bit more about the insights that they found in this next conversation. Joining me is Raghu Narula, who is the head of wealth and personal banking at HSBC India. Thank you so much, Mr. Narula, for taking the time. First, I want to understand, what was the basis of this study? What did you aim to find out?
Well, thanks for having me, Alex. I guess, well-known fact, we're the largest global diaspora in the world are Indians, right? Across various countries. And in a lot of these countries, we're typically amongst the more affluent immigrant communities, contributing quite significantly to the prosperity of the economies in which they reside. Now, as HSBC, right, we want to open up this world of opportunity for these global Indians, not just in the countries where they reside, where a number of them are banking with us, but also connecting them back home, right? So this is kind of the largest cross-border study of its kind, done to kind of understand the attitudes, the emotional connections, the motivations, as well as how they perceive India to play a role in their lives.
Okay, understood. I think, I was glancing through the report that you came up with, and one fact or one response stood out to me, which is that a majority of the respondents that you spoke to said that they continue to invest in India, and quite a few of those people said that they see incredible opportunity in this country, and this is coming from people that are spread across the developed world. They're looking at India with a lot of hope, with a lot of optimism. Is that one of the key findings of the report? And what are the specific insights when it comes to investment that you found out?
Resoundingly so, Alex, and it was quite surprising, right? So nearly 80% of the global Indians that we surveyed across all of these markets actually are investing actively in India. And if you compare that with about 85% of them are investing in their own market. So it's almost at parity with the markets in which they reside. But what's even more interesting is over the last 3 years, more than 50% of them have actually increased their investments, right? And the motivation behind that, if you start to think of, we've also looked at first, second, and third generation Indians. Even third generation Indians, nearly 63% of them have started to look at increasing their investments in the country. So that's kind of what we're finding in terms of raw numbers, right? If you link that, Alex, on what are the insights that are driving it, I think there are three key components, right? One is this key on, given that they play a role in the prosperity of the economies in which they reside, they equally see a role that they need or want to play in the growth of India, right? And that comes across in a few numbers, right? So the areas that they're interested in are sustainability, comes out quite strongly. So particularly around, environmental, social issues from a country perspective, be it around renewables, energy, skills development in the country. Those are investment areas. But specifically a dynamic, over the last 18 months to 2 years, and, I was living in the UK until recently, and I lost my dad in Delhi about a year ago, is the pandemic, right? Like nearly 72%, and that's quite a significant number. Nearly 3 out of 4 global Indians have felt closer and more connected to friends and family in India over the period of the pandemic. And nearly a third have increased their investments with 2 reasons, right? Proactively, trying to promote a positive change in the country. And second, sort of almost saying, with the aim of supporting our recovery out of COVID. And that's the degree of emotional connect that's actually personal investment decisions at this point, Alex.
Understood. I do want to ask about insights, and you'll clearly have some of them with regard to the approach to asset classes, especially because of the way that our equity markets have performed in the recent past. But I want to take a very short break, Raghu, on this program. Do stay with us, and we'll be back on the other side with more. Viewers, do stay tuned. All right, welcome back. You're watching The Money Show, and we're in conversation with Raghu Narula, who is the Head of Wealth and Personal Banking at HSBC India. We've been having a fascinating conversation about the approach that global Indians have to investing in India. Raghu, I also want to understand how they perceive different asset classes. Did you ask these Indians, these global Indians, about how they see real estate, about how they see the equity markets? What were the insights that you found there?
Alex, I think one is broader confidence in the country and its growth prospects comes through loud and clear. If we dig further, clearly property is an important category, right, for a lot of these customers. And they're looking at predominantly metros or closer to the areas from which they originate. So property still continues to be quite core to where they see some of the investments coming into India. Beyond that, when you talk of particularly around investments, what's interesting is not just the categories, but also how they make these decisions, right? So the insight that's coming through, what's interesting is about more than half of them actually base their decisions based on what their friends and family are telling them in the country. About just under that, talk to friends and family in the markets in which they reside. But only a third would actually go to financial advisors, right? So that's kind of where, given that we are uniquely positioned as an international bank that also is working through wealth, there's an opportunity to really support their decision making in connecting them to those opportunities.
Okay. There are, and the reason why I wanted to know about real estate as well is that usually a global Indian or an Indian living abroad would consider buying real estate if they have some sort of plan to move back to the country. There were also interesting statistics, and I think a larger number than I personally would have expected, that do want to come back to India. They perhaps want to retire in the country of residence, but they want to move back to India. Why do you think that is, and could you take us through those numbers?
Yeah, no, it's quite it surprised me as well, Alex, but ironically, I'm one of those people who's come back to the country after nearly 20 years traveling in 7 different markets. So some of this I can resonate with. But what's interesting, to your point, that nearly 1 in 4, right? If you talk about, they're saying about 63% of third generation Indians even if they retire in the country that they're currently in, and the motivations for that are typically the usual, better quality of life, safety, etc. But they do see themselves coming back to India to live for a prolonged period of time, either for work or for education, right? And that if you take a third generation Indian wanting to come in over the next 2 years, nearly a third of them want to come into India over the next 2 years to pursue one of those opportunities. And it varies, right? So if you take first and second gen, it's predominantly to be one obviously around the economic prospects, but one predominantly to be closer to friends and family. Right? But if you go down to the third generation, to the point that you were making, there's more of a how do I connect back to my roots, right? How do I start to understand culture better? Nearly 35% of them are looking for that as a reason to come back into the country, understand culture, understand the food, and then clearly, obviously connect with friends and family as well. But for third generation, that's slightly lower down the priority than the first and second gen. That is surprising, but that's also not surprising because we've seen a lot of pent-up demand of people that haven't traveled to the country for a long time. You start to join up the other insights on, during the pandemic, they felt greater connection, greater care for the country, for its people, linked with the motivations around, we want to participate in the growth and the recovery in India, coupled with the confidence they have in its future, a real manifestation of traveling physically and wanting to live here. I think it does join up, but it was surprising.
Absolutely. It's great. And what I'm taking, Raghu, from this conversation is that the grass is certainly as green here in India as it is in other parts of the world. And that certainly stands out to me. Thank you so much for taking the time. And it's been a great conversation.
Thank you, Alex. Appreciate it.